And we have breaking news right now. I had a duet planned with my friend and Florida lawman, Dave Aronberg, colleague here on the Midas Touch Network. And it was planned just minutes after John Bolton, former national security advisor and staunch Trump critic, was indicted. I have my copy of the indictment right now in my hand, about 26 pages, a little bit meatier in every sense of the words than the kind of indictments we're used to seeing in the Eastern District of Virginia, for example, where James Comey and Letitia James are indicted. According to early reports, before this indictment came down, MSNBC noted that this indictment, and this turned out to be true, has the full participation of line prosecutors in the District of Maryland, and the prosecutors there seem to believe that the charges here have some merit. We're talking an 18-count indictment for the mishandling of national defense information, otherwise known as the Espionage Act, various charges related to that. I'm going to get into that right now with Dave Aronberg. Dave, how are you doing?
Good to be with you. Adam, you and I have been together on TV. First time we've done a duet together. So this is exciting. And what a day for it, huh? Breaking news.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Usually when I see you on a guest panel with me, we're talking about Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell on CNN. But what are your first thoughts on this? Obviously, this indictment lands with curious timing, right? There have been a couple of indictments, mostly out of the Eastern District of Virginia, where Trump forced a bunch of prosecutors out, starting with Eric Siebert, the former U.S. attorney, there in order to get his subordinate, his former lawyer, Lindsay Halligan, to push forward these two cases. But those were kind of two-page indictments. This one is, I believe, 26 pages and has the full participation in the office. What do you think is going on here?
Two things can be right at the same time. First, John Bolton is being targeted because he is Trump's enemy. Trump wanted him prosecuted, and he got what he wanted. And at the same time, it could be also true that John Bolton may have violated the law. And there was a federal judge back when John Bolton published his book. I believe he was a Reagan-appointed federal judge who was very upset with Bolton because Bolton put sensitive information in his book without going through the traditional clearance process. Now, Bolton's argument is that when he went through it, Trump was in power the first time, and they were dragging their feet. So he got the first round of reviews and approvals, and then the Trump administration says, we're going to do another round of reviews. And Bolton's like, no, it's going. And that's where the federal judge said, you should have waited. You exposed sensitive information. But because the cat is out of the bag, it's over. We can't do anything about it. What's the sanction? But you could be prosecuted in the future. Essentially, that's what the judge said. So am I surprised that he's being prosecuted now? No. I think for Trump, this is low-hanging fruit.
Right. And this was an investigation that I understand began in the prior administration. So this is one of the interesting things because of the prosecution of James Comey, because of the prosecution of Letitia James. There's always that hanging question. How much of this is that Trump is going after his enemies? That part of this indictment references the book that very much embarrassed Trump. You alluded to it, The Room Where It Happens. And I'm going to read some parts of the indictment, get your quick reaction to it. But the indictment seems to involve two people who he describes as his editors, individual one, individual two. Individual two is described as a Bolton relative. Said, Bolton often referred to these notes as his diary and sent them to individuals 1 and 2 over his personal, non-governmental email accounts or a messaging application. The information contained in these notes included detailed information that Bolton learned from meetings with senior members of the U.S. government, intelligence briefings from members of the intelligence community and military, discussions with foreign leaders and foreign intelligence and military organizations, and intelligence products and reports, which Bolton had access to because of his role as national security advisor. It's interesting that this is involving non-governmental messaging application. We know how deeply this administration seems to care about not using non-governmental
Right.
messaging applications. But he apparently wrote things in those notes to the tune of, the intel briefer said, while in the Situation Room, I learned that. And according to the indictment, he reported to the FBI that his email accounts, the email accounts at issue, had been hacked by the Iranian government. What are your thoughts to those bare details of the indictment? What's going on here? It seems to relate to that very opinion that the federal judge that you mentioned, the Reagan appointee, spoke about. What's going on here?
Right. Well, that's right. So Bolton went through the clearance process. He didn't get the full clearance. He got an initial round, and then he was upset that he thought that the Trump administration was intentionally trying to suppress his book, and his editors were giving him a lot of pressure to move. And so he said, I got the first round done. They're acting in bad faith. Let's go. When you do that, you got to hope that Trump doesn't become president again, because this criminal investigation on this conduct was opened by the Biden administration and then closed, right? So it was closed. Now, actually, I don't know if it was first. I think it might have been first open under Trump, but it was closed under Biden. And then when Trump got to power, he obviously now completed the indictment. Now, here's the crazy part about it to me, is that John Bolton was asked over and over again who he was going to support for president, Trump or Kamala Harris. And he said, I can't vote for either one of them. Like, really? Well, one of them will try to incarcerate you and the other one won't. And you can't choose between the two. So I just think that he should have been aware that this was inevitable if Trump got back into power.
And as we record this conversation, this is very early. The indictment really just landed. Minutes before we started talking, I started printing out and speed reading as fast as I could. But it's very interesting. I fully expect that Donald Trump is going to release a statement celebrating this, presumption of innocence, be damned. And he's going to point out the fact that he was prosecuted for the mishandling of national defense information, more counts of Espionage Act violations than John Bolton faces here. I actually covered his case down in Florida before U.S. District Judge Eileen Cannon. So I guess my question is, doesn't that backstory, doesn't the fact that Trump is almost certain to take a victory lap here, isn't that going to color the public's perception of this, whatever the facts of this case may be, that even if an independent line prosecutor brought this across the finish line, that at the end of the day, it's going to look like they're trying to please the boss who wanted to get one of his enemies, particularly on something that had to do with something that he was charged with himself.
Correct. And you can't look at this in a vacuum. You have to look at it against the prosecutions of Letitia James and James Comey, which to me are clear examples of vindictive prosecution. But here, you don't have Lindsay Halligan, Trump's hand-picked U.S. attorney who has never prosecuted a case before. She's not the one who did this. And that's why I think that if Bolton makes a motion to dismiss based on vindictive prosecution, which I expect, it's going to be harder, because even though Trump clearly wants Bolton to be prosecuted and is going to take that victory lap, the evidence is the evidence. And the fact that there was a prior criminal investigation opened and closed by Biden, that I think will convince a judge probably to let this move on. Now, I still think it's going to be a high bar to overcome to show that John Bolton willfully withheld this information. Especially, these cases are not usually prosecuted if they're told to return it, and they do. So if he had not been told to return this stuff, then I don't see a conviction. If he was told to return it, like Trump was, and willfully ignored it and kept it, that's a problem for Bolton. I just don't know yet if that's true.
Right. He's charged, I should note, with the transmission and retention of national defense information. It's also interesting, as you point out, Trump was asked repeatedly to return the classified documents found in Mar-a-Lago, absolutely refused to, which is why he was, in addition to the Espionage Act allegations, charged with obstruction along with his co-defendants.
And that's the difference, by the way, between Trump and Biden. When they try to compare Trump and Biden's conduct, Biden did not withhold the information after being told to turn it back over.
Right. And in terms of the public being on guard to the fact that we now live in a post-Comey indictment and a post-Letitia James indictment world, I think one of the things that's really interesting comparing and contrasting those cases with the Bolton indictment is I'm looking at the final page here. There's a signature of a proper assistant U.S. attorney. There's the acting deputy chief, the acting chief, a trial attorney from the National Security Cyber Division, and the assistant U.S. attorney under the signature of the U.S. attorney of that district. If you look at the other two indictments of Comey and Letitia James, all that you have are the signature of Lindsay Halligan, the rookie prosecutor who had only represented insurance firms and never prosecuted a criminal case before stepping into a jury room and essentially saying, yes, sir, Mr. President, after Trump demands his political enemies be targeted. In terms of our role as political commentators, how do we alert the public that something is incredibly awry and isn't, to a certain extent, the die cast because of the Letitia James case and the Comey case, that the public might not be able to tell the difference?
I think that we're so divided as a public that people who love Trump will believe anything he says and believe in all these prosecutions, and people who hate Trump will say this is all vindictive prosecution, and then the people who are not paying attention will continue to not pay attention. But I do think that it's obvious when he himself is going around ordering his prosecutors, his prosecutors to do something, and then they don't do it, and he fires them, and then he brings on a person who has never been a prosecutor before to prosecute the case, and they do it immediately, Lindsay Halligan. And there's no career prosecutor who signs the indictment. There's no career prosecutor who goes into that grand jury room with her, and she gets these indictments. Those cases are doomed to fail. Those cases, I think, will be dismissed even before they get to a jury based on vindictive prosecution. And those cases will be exposed to the public as just worthless. And even some of Trump's supporters, quite frankly, and I've spoken to some, realize that these cases are worthless, but they justify it by saying tit for tat. That's not good. That's like a child's game. That's not how you run a criminal justice system. As a former prosecutor, as former state attorney, you never do something like, well, we're going to do this because they did it to us. That's not how it works. When it comes to John Bolton, this is more nuanced, but it will get caught up in the Tish James Comey vindictive prosecution. So I think that it will be harder for the administration to get out their narrative that perhaps there's some there. As of right now, it's so early, we don't totally know, and hopefully we'll have more information to make that decision ourselves. But it's still bothersome to me that even if there's a there, that someone is being prosecuted because the president is targeting them. Just like it was troubling to me when Tish James campaigned on going after Donald Trump. As a prosecutor, you should never do either one.
Right. And I think one of the vital distinctions that you pointed out there, Dave, in what happened in the Trump cases versus what's happening now, there was never that moment where a stream of prosecutors had a crisis of conscience. There's no evidence here. We can't proceed. And that there was an open demand from the president of the United States to pressure out anyone who didn't see the evidence there. That's what takes the Tish James and James Comey prosecutions to a whole new level. And for better or for worse, this John Bolton indictment lands in the wake of all that after the system has absorbed that blow.
And I don't put the Letitia James case against Donald Trump on the same level as Trump's case against Letitia James. The case against Letitia James is totally garbage. I mean, I read it, it's total garbage, and no one else has ever been prosecuted for that crime for an allegation of $19,000. No one at the federal level. That's never happened. When it comes to what Tish James did to Donald Trump, there have been people who have been charged for that, for inflating their properties. And you have that issue where Trump inflated the size of his condominium, 30,000 when it was really 11,000 square feet. And so that's not just a rounding error. That's not just a subjective mistake. That's a question of getting a ruler and intentionally tripling the size. So you can complain that Tish James should not have publicly said, I'm going to go after this guy, because I said she should never have said that. That was a problem. But as far as the case itself, there's a reason why that wasn't dismissed based on vindictive prosecution, because they had the goods. They don't have the goods against Letitia James. I don't know yet if they have the goods against John Bolton.
Right. And just on a surface level, in terms of an appearance, that followed a years-long painstaking investigation, not a hustling out of everyone who stood in the way, itching to press go on claims that they couldn't support in court. Dave, always a pleasure appearing with you, whether on YouTube or on TV. Let's do this again soon.
Thanks for having me, Adam.
And for folks who enjoyed watching our analysis, go subscribe to the Legal AF YouTube page here on the Midas Touch Network. If you want to see more of my journalism, visit www.allrisenews.com. That's www.allrisenews.com. And also visit Dave Aronberg's channel on the Legal AF here, the Florida Lawman. Thanks for watching.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.